Sexual orientation should not be discussed in elementary school. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, move. Oh, shit. Okay. Okay. So, by the way, this is why you actually need intellectual diversity in your classrooms, right? This is why you need intellectual diversity. Okay, but do you actually believe that? I can present the position. No, we need, okay, so, we need someone who actually believes that. Do you actually believe that? I wholeheartedly believe it. Okay, I take you for your word. Okay, so that's the other thing. We need to be a little nimble and make changes in the process, so that's fine. Okay, so I'm going to go to you. So in a couple of sentences, 2-3 sentences, say why sexual orientation should not be discussed in elementary school, briefly.
I believe that sexual orientation is a very deeply personal thing that should be developed by that person as and when they complete puberty, and that any attempt to undermine that by teaching somebody about that beforehand is a way to sexually groom them into whatever the teacher or instructor sees fit. And I also think it's suspicious that most of the instruction on sexual orientation to minors is happening by the LGBTQ community.
Okay. What is your opinion?
I don't think that public education has the authority to, I guess, influence those. But
it says discuss, not influence.
To discuss those, because it can influence, I guess, their minds, and also kids of that age are very are undeveloped and don't have, I guess, are easily swayed as well, for the most part. And so I don't think they have authority that should be within the home, within that person, within their family.
Okay, I think I understand. You are. Let's get you in the middle there. That's good. Thanks, appreciate that. You're on the agree line. Tell us why.
Well, the way the question's phrased, this is like should not, like definite black and white not. That guy's ad is definitely should, absolutely should. I agree that there could be an opportunity for some discussion somewhere based, K through 6, perhaps in 6th grade, perhaps with permission of the parents, perhaps in special groups, perhaps. I don't want to close the door on never.
Okay. So in your opinion, you don't want to say never because you think that there could be exceptions, like Correct. Parent night or something.
Right.
Okay.
I definitely disagree that it should be done, always done. And it definitely shouldn't be done secretly or behind parents' backs without their saying. So,
okay, but that's right. But that's not that. It's just discussed.
Right. Discussed.
Okay. You strongly disagree. Sexual orientation should not be discussed in school. Tell us in 2 or 3 sentences why.
Yeah, I think discussing sexual orientation is as simple as saying, like, hey, some people are gay, some men like men, some women like women. I don't think that's going to tear apart any kids, and I actually think it does a great deal in enhancing equality if kids view certain kinds of relationships as acceptable. I think if they're socialized in a way that, they're not, I think it has some pretty negative outcomes, so I'd like them to just understand that it's okay.
What do you mean by equality?
So if you have a decent set of people who believe that your very relationship and the way it exists is wrong, that's kind of an inherent imposition of inequality onto you.
Okay. Did anybody want to, you two in particular, does anybody want to address that? Did anything he say resonate with you? Not did you have to agree with it, but did anything you say is like, oh yeah, I can see that. What did he say?
So I could see that, kids discussing sexual orientation could be anything. It could be just saying, talking about gay, lesbian, whatever. So in that meaning, yeah, it could be. But also I think it's a very slippery slope talking about it and discussing it, especially with those young people. I don't think it is okay to do that because some people could take it too far and it could turn bad really quick.
Okay, but what if we limited the discussion to like not grooming, to use your word, but actual discussion? Like, look, we know that some people are gay. We know that some, I think there's 2% of bonobos, and so there's a whole book about what percentage by species. Like, we know this, and to have a factual discussion, not a values-based push, but just a discussion.
I don't think so at the elementary level. Because like I said before, kids aren't really as developed yet. They're still learning. They're easily influenced. And I just don't think that that's appropriate for that age level.
What Do you think you understood his arguments?
I did. He's saying essentially that, discussion of, sexual orientation is not appropriate during elementary school. Am I correct in that? Okay, so I guess my counterpoint would be I think a lot of kids already learn to a degree about sexual orientation. And mind you, we're not talking about sex. We're not talking about telling kids about that directly. We're talking about sexual orientation, which is a very different thing. And I think given that kids already kind of learn about, heterosexual relationships, them being, kind of the norm that we're all used to and established and have established, I think it's, really no big deal for them to learn about alternate kinds of relationships.
So you said something interesting to me that I didn't think of until you said it. Do you think heterosexual relationships should be discussed in elementary school?
I don't think any sort of sexual orientation should be discussed in, frankly, any type of schooling, because any context of orientation is going to be sexual. And so when we talk about, well, some men like other men, the question arises, like what? How do men like other men? Do they like it in that they like to take it up to you know what? Because that's really what it gets down to in the end. Orientation will inherently devolve into sexual topics. And so,
I think I'm tracking. What would be wrong about or bad about that?
So discussion about sexual orientation cannot be divorced from discussions about sex, because this is the way in which sexual orientation is. We can talk about romance, and that is a bit different because it's more of a personal relationship, right. But sexual orientation is in its nature and by definition sexual.
Right. And what would be wrong about having that discussion? Even like the culmination of the act.
So
not the value promotion of it, but the factual.
I think conversation in terms of children, we must recognize that children have a certain naiveté and they have a certain innocence that almost all of us agree needs to be protected. And so discussion about sexual orientation before the development of puberty and the natural recognition of sex leads to sexual perversions and other.
So do you think that if a child learns about two guys, for example, that's likely to sway his opinion to want to be gay?
I do, yes.
And why would that be bad?
I don't think any child should engage in or learn about sexuality before puberty. People just aren't wired that way. They're not made for it, and it's wholly unnatural.
Okay. Wait, wholly unnatural. Okay, what if I could show you, what if you could see evidence, I wish I remember the name of that book, of the influence, the incidence of homosexuality throughout the animal kingdom. Would that be sufficient evidence that it's natural?
So there's usually one example that the LGBT community will bring up in terms of homosexuality manifesting in the animal kingdom, and that one is bonobos. Virtually every other animal, it displays entirely heterosexual relationships. Bonobos in particular, they have some very interesting sexual perversions as well. They will also eat their children. And so I don't think that bonobos should be the model for sexual orientation.
Okay, I'm coming back to you. Okay, at what age did you choose to be straight?
I guess I don't know. Probably, I mean, I suppose somewhere in my youth, probably around, I suppose maybe 4th or 5th grade.
And did you sit down and like think about it? Like, oh, there's John. When would we like to hold his hand? And oh, there's Sue. I mean, was it like a deliberative, you know what I mean? Like, was it something you just like thought about?
I guess not. I guess there's more just a natural, thing. It's just. I guess what I just realized it was natural. So it just kind of was. I suppose born into it and thought that's the way it should be.
Do you mind if I ask you a series of deeply personal questions? You can say no.
Sure.
Are you straight?
Yes.
What amount of watching homosexual pornography would turn you into a homosexual?
None.
Okay. Do you think it's because your sexuality is fixed?
Yeah.
Do you think it was fixed in adulthood, or do you think it was fixed in childhood?
Sexuality and
sexual orientation.
I guess it was fixed in childhood.
So if it was fixed in childhood, then those arguments wouldn't stand.
What arguments?
The argument, I don't know his name, the argument that the guy in front of you made. That it could somehow influences someone's sexual orientation.
Well, yeah, I mean, no, because obviously a lot of people are confused or don't have those decisions made up, and so they could possibly be confused and want to change or think there's something that they're not, or think of, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. So I've been baffled by this. So let's say it's the case. I'm not saying it's the case, but let's just pretend for the purpose of the conversation that it is the case. Let's say it's the case that if a young kid gets exposed, they have a discussion and they say some people are gay, and it never heard it in his life. Maybe they're from some kind of community, I don't know where, in Arkansas or something, but it just, I don't know where I came up with that, but it puts it in their head. Oh, wow. Like, I can be with a guy. And like, let's say they think that I'm really going out on a limb here. And then they have a sexual experience with a guy. What would be the problem with that, period, one? And two, what would be the problem with getting the idea from knowing that homosexuals exist? Like, what would be problematic about that?
At what age?
Well, elementary school.
This is difficult for me. I'm a different generation than the rest of these people.
Me too.
So
I'm older than you.
I'll be 57 in a week.
Okay, I take that back.
All right. Show your elders some respect, sir. Thank you. It's difficult. That's why I'm on the agree line and not the strongly agree, is that there's, you painting things black and white with a definitive line down the middle. It's just been my nature and what I do for a living. I don't take sides. I play the middle, and I have to go with the facts and the data, and I get some discretion in what I do. So
okay, that's really interesting to me. Okay, so what facts or data would you have to move one step to the left or one step to the right?
There's really no facts or data in this. And this is all the only facts and data that I could see is what would make his position untenable would be the grooming part, which he's not talking about. He's talking about a discussion about it, which is why I'm not over there. Okay. And these young gentlemen are in a position where they're afraid of just the mere conversation about it would be considered grooming. And the implanting of that would be a seed that would somehow flourish later in life.
Do you think that's the case?
No, I don't.
So
I think if it's going to be, I don't want to say grooming like this criminal perverted sense that we've been hearing about so much, but just like, but sometimes you have to convince people like.
Okay. And so I just want to be sure. So you're a data and evidence guy. And what evidence could that gentleman there provide you with at the end? I don't know anybody's name. And these gentlemen provide you with here. What could they provide you with that would cause you to move a step to the left? And what could he tell you to move to step to the right? Now, hold on. Think about that, because I'm coming back to you. Okay, so you heard those arguments. So you're still here, and you haven't moved, so I assume you still believe what you believe. Yeah. Okay, so what could you tell them? What do they know? What do you know? Nobody in this room wants to be wrong one more second than they have to be, right? Nobody. You don't want to be wrong one. I don't want to be one. Okay. Nobody wants to be wrong. So obviously there's a substantive disagreement, difference of opinion. So what do you know that they don't know that would cause them not to walk to there, but to walk one line? What do you know? What could you tell them to move them one line? What data, as this gentleman says, facts, evidence, reason, do you think they're missing?
I think that one of the things is that sex education, maybe not education on sex orientation specifically, but the broader field, it actually reduces incidents of, childhood sexual assault in everywhere where it's taught. So like, because if kids have the means to identify that something bad is happening to them, they're going to identify that to, a trusted adult.
Okay. And so you think that the weighing of the identification and weighing of sexual assault weighs heavier than the possibility of somebody having a discussion, an elementary school student having a discussion about sex in school and kind of turning them into a homosexual?
I don't think people really get turned into homosexuals.
I'm trying to, so I'm trying to give the position, well, what would you say how else would you encapsulate the position other than turning into homosexual?
So, I mean, I guess if we were to say that people would hypothetically have their sexuality in some way altered at a premature age.
Well, that would be turning into a homosexual.
Well, I mean, it can't just necessarily be turning into a homosexual. You could have your sexuality altered and you're more expressive with it or something like that.
Okay. So, all right. So I want to so his claim is that, and I don't know the data, this is way out of my area of expertise, but let's say he's right. Let's just accept for the purpose of the conversation he's correct, that when kids learn about this stuff, have a discussion in school, they're much more likely to identify instances of when they've been sexually assaulted. Would that be enough would that weigh heavier than the possibility of, how did you phrase it? Not turning into, but what was the phrase you used?
Becoming more expressive in sexuality.
That was such a politic way of saying it. Becoming more, homosexual experimentation. Yeah.
If that is part of the curriculum, is teaching them that what could be predatory behavior, et cetera. If that's part of his curriculum in the discussion, that would help. But
that would move. That's interesting. That would move you.
Well, just a discussion about what he's talking about isn't going to automatically give these kids this magic of knowing, oh, I'm being predated upon. So if that's part of the discussion, then yeah, I agree with his position on talking about this to younger kids will allow them and give them some extra tools to know when they're being groomed or.
And so would that be sufficient to move you to the slightly agree or no?
I could move one this way, but I could never move that way again, just because of the hard black and white. I can't. I could move there, and I could probably move these guys.
Well, you think you can move them?
Sure.
Move them to here? Well, if you're willing to move now, why don't you move there? If not, okay. What could you tell them to move them just to the agree?
Just to perhaps get them to understand the black and whiteness of the whole thing, that there could possibly be some benefit somewhere, somehow, to some kind of discussion about sexuality.
Like treating homosexuals as equals and not as inferior or subservient.
I'm not saying agree with it. I'm not saying love it or accept it or appreciate it, but perhaps just agree that there could be some value in some kind of conversation. Okay. Especially if it is teaching young children to understand when they're being predated upon.
Okay. So he's basically saying, and I don't want to put words in it, let me know. He's basically saying, listen, he's going to give you the fact that there could be like creepy groomers out there. But by and large, there are instances when having these discussions lead to, I'm going to borrow your word, lead to treating people of different orientations more equally, predation things, some things that I don't know. Would you agree that there could be some benefit to that in some cases?
I guess I agree that there could be some benefits, but and to the point where there is, I guess, talking about, you know, how the facts, he says the facts of, you know, it educates kids on when they know when they're being preyed upon or whatever. I would that go into talking about sexual orientation or?
Yeah, I mean, that's a discussion, and it's the benefit that kids could get from that to not basically have their lives destroyed. Would that be sufficient for you to move to agree to say that sexual orientation should not be discussed in elementary school? That you'll agree to that, but not strongly agree?
No, because I don't think predatory education involves sexual orientation. To talking about that, I think it's two different subjects.
I think education on child predation is a net positive, and I think it should be addressed. I think once we start talking about sexual orientation being introduced into schools, it's far more than that, and that's usually used as a Trojan horse.
A Trojan horse for what?
For topics of sexual orientation that many people would not agree with. right? Education about what child predation is and how children can avoid this. Everybody agrees that this is positive, but often it can devolve into topics that are not just about avoiding child predation, but about other sexual topics.
Okay, so that didn't work. We tried. So what would cause you to move to agree? Like what data, what evidence, what reason would you have to hear to move you to agree?
I would need evidence that education on sexual orientation does not alter the sexual orientation of children, and that the sexual orientation of children is set in stone before children are approached about this in very early education.
And the reason you'd need that evidence, it must be because you think that there's something intrinsically bad about same-sex relations.
I wouldn't necessarily say that, but I think it's wrong to convince children in their youth to be something that would not have normally manifested had no influences influenced them in their childhood.
So if, and I'm not saying I have this evidence, in fact, I don't have it, but if you could be shown evidence that those discussions did not increase the likelihood that someone would, whatever the politic phrase was, experiment or whatever, have a homosexual experience, you would move to the agree.
Yes.
Would you move to the agree? Or is that not a factor for you?
I honestly wasn't really listening too much to that part.
That's fine. No, that's fine. That's fine. It's always better to be honest.
But I was thinking about what could move me.
Yeah, what could move you?
So what could move me to the degree is, say in the case, I kind of like what they were both talking about with the idea of maybe an organized maybe conference with parents that the school would invite them to talk about something.
Like what he said at the beginning.
Yeah. But, I don't think that it is something that should be discussed in public elementary school at all, or any elementary school at all. But it's, say maybe a lot of parents don't feel comfortable talking to their kids about something like this. So maybe in some circumstance, if there was an event that the school put on, that all parents and kids came together and were able to talk about something like this out of school, that might move me to agree.
Okay, so let's run with that for a sec. So let's say that there was something heinous in some, I don't know where Arkansas is on my brain, but some like place in the middle of nowhere, and there was a beating of a gay couple because they were gay, and the community was wrestling with this. Would you think a discussion, because I'm trying to feed off of what you said, that there could be some cases, would you think that in that circumstance, a discussion about that in school would be, basically don't beat your fellow citizens for the lifestyle choices they make? Would you think that would be beneficial to, would that be enough to move you to the agree?
I don't think so, because I don't think that even those topics should necessarily need to be discussed in public elementary school.
Okay, what if it happened twice? Same town.
Same town, it happened twice, and
Different gay guys got beaten up because they're gay, and they yelled terrible things at them.
no, I don't think that needs to be discussed in elementary school.
Is there any number I could give you that would move you to the agree?
I guess who is it by? Who's attacking them?
That's some deranged maniac.
I mean, I guess for the protection of the kids, maybe talk about safety and health and things like that, but I don't think it has to do with anything to talk about sexual orientation.
So you can imagine. So is that sufficient to move you to the agree?
That argument alone?
Yeah, the hypothetical.
No, because I mean, I don't think that has a whole lot to do with sexual orientation.
All right, I'm going to give you the last word. You've heard their arguments. We had someone move. I would like you to address those guys. What is the best argument that you could give that sexual orientation should be discussed in elementary school? What is the best thing that you could say to them to hope to change their mind?
I would say that, if we can demonstrate that there is some kind of harm in teaching kids about sexual orientation, then maybe you have a point. But from where I'm sitting right now, I don't really see that harm existing. I think you would have to demonstrate it to me. I think the thing that I look for is what are the advantages of teaching kids about sexual orientation in elementary school versus what are the disadvantages. And so far, I see a good deal of advantages, including increasing inequality, equality. Yeah. But I do not see a whole lot of disadvantages. And, you know, one of the arguments I heard over there was that talking about sexual orientation will lead intrinsically to kids learning about sex. And I don't really buy that argument. I think that I learned that my parents were married when I was maybe 2 or 3. I didn't learn about sex when I was 2 or 3, you know?
And talking about homosexuality tonight has not increased your desire for men.
No.
Okay. Just checking. Okay, so real quick. So not do you agree with them, but do you think you understand where they're coming from? Not do you agree, do you understand where they're coming from?
I always try to understand where other people are coming from.
Is that a yes?
Yeah.
Do you think you understand where he's coming from and where they're coming from?
I do.
Not agree, but understand.
That's why I'm in the middle. Yeah, I understand both sides.
Okay.
I like where I'm at.
All right. Do you feel not? Do you agree with him? And I'm gonna ignore you for a minute. That's gonna make a joke about age. That's you could do when you're 55. You can make jokes like that. Okay. Do you feel? Do you think you understand his position? Not that you agree, but you understand it.
Yeah.
And do you think that the reasons that you have? Do you feel more confident now as a result of this process for the line you're standing on?
Do I feel more confident?
Yeah. So before, like, if we had a time, a mystical time thing, and we could go back from when you first stood up here, are you more confident now that you're standing on the right line than when you first got up here?
I wouldn't say I'm
As confident?
as confident. No.
Okay. Not do you agree with him, but do you understand where he's coming from? Not do you agree, to understand.
Yes, I do.
Okay. All right, good. Thank you, everybody. Good. Thanks.